A very good day to Dr. Yap, our instructor of English phonetics and phonology. My group members and I decided to carry out a study on voiceless stop consonants in Malaysian English. Now, before we begin, allow me to introduce you to our dearest group members. The group consists of 5 members in total, including Edmund, Afirul Nazrin, Pang Juin, Farah Raihana, and I, Azira. To give you a clearer idea of the study, we will take a closer look at a very brief introduction, the objective of our study, the methods used throughout the process of conducting the study, the findings all 5 of us managed to collect, the interpretation and justification of the findings before we finally draw a conclusion.
Malaysia is a country of multiple language backgrounds due to the colonial backdrop. Despite having Bahasa Malaysia as the national language, the English language remains an integral part when it comes to international administration, trade, and commerce. Due to the prevailing influences of their first languages, Malaysians created a variation of English, namely Malaysian English. English becomes a second language, with their respective mother tongue being the first language as a result of imperial rule from the British Empire. A Malaysian acquires their second language via factors such as first language background, socio-demographic history, and initial acquisition among many others. This project looks at how Malaysians pronounce the voiceless stop consonants of t, and d. The objective of this project is to identify the similarities and differences of the voiceless stop consonants of Malaysian English as compared to the native speakers of the English language. This project would highlight how acoustic phonetics can be applied to determine the differences in pronunciation. It would also shed light on the degree of closeness of Malaysian English is, in contrast to native speakers.
It is significant to note that a similar study on voiceless stop consonants in Malaysian English had been previously carried out by Toshiko Yamaguchi and Magnus Peterson back in 2012. Therefore, the study became one of our main references in further assisting us throughout the process of carrying out the study. Now let's take a closer look at the methodology of the study. The very first thing we did was to prepare a list of words and sentences with a little help of the previous study to determine what could exactly bring clarity to our results. Before finalizing 12 different Malaysian speakers consisting of equal numbers of Malays, Chinese, and Indians, we first approached over 20 English speakers so we could weigh our options better. These speakers were chosen according to their first language acquisition, meaning those who share similar second language, which, in this context, is English. Next, we recorded the pronunciation of each word and sentences prepared by plugging in the noise cancellation headphones to a computer and saved the sound files via Pride. This process was repeated for 12 times within the span of 3 days. We then examined the pronunciation of each word by focusing on the burst and the beginning of each sound made. Before tabulating the data onto a master sheet, we then calculated the voice onset time of each one in order to draw a conclusion. Results were then carefully compared.
As you know that we use PRAT to collect data to calculate the VOT from each speaker to pronounce each word. And from this data, we are going to calculate the mean average value of VOT for each phonemes so that we can interpret it further and To identify these types of sounds, they are actually the standard VOT measurement, which is, as you can see from the table, for voice sound, it should be between -125 to -75 milliseconds. For short voicing lag such as t and the, should be between 0 to 25 milliseconds, and for long voicing lag such as the, should be between 60 to 100 milliseconds. However, based on our data, we can see that Malaysian English speakers are actually inconsistent in their pronunciation. The standard measurement of sounds doesn't really apply to Malaysian English because certain words, certain speakers use longer time to actually pronounce it, and vice versa. For example, from these 4 tables, for the first one described, it can stretch up to 10 milliseconds to 44 milliseconds from different speakers. Next, for them, it can stretch up to 5 milliseconds to 35 milliseconds, and so on for time. It can stretch up to 30 to 126 milliseconds. So you can see that from each speakers, their VOT value is different, and the inconsistency in pronunciation is very clear based on the data. There are actually several factors that contribute to the inconsistency of their pronunciation, such as the vowel fronting or assimilation and the preceding word. These 2 factors actually affects how Malaysian speakers pronounce the word. Hence, VOT value will be different.
Based on the data that we got and that you can now see, the average value of the voice onset timing, we can assert that Malaysian English speakers do not differentiate the pronunciation between the dental fricatives and alveolar stops. Instead, they only correspond to each other in terms of its voicing. Our data clearly indicates that the average value of the voiced dental fricative is 16 milliseconds and the voiced alveolar stop is 14 milliseconds. In contrast, the voiceless dental fricative is 30 milliseconds and the voiceless alveolar stop is 37 milliseconds. From here, it is safe to say that the VOT values of both the voiced and voiceless dental fricatives are very close to the baseline of the alveolar stops, respectively. So we can therefore say that the alveolar stops corresponds with the dental fricative in terms of its voicing, and Malaysian English speakers do not differentiate between the dental fricatives and alveolar stops, as the data clearly shows. As such, the claims in the previous study that Malaysian speakers are producing a new form of alveolar stop may not be accurate.
Although VOT values for Malaysian speakers are inconsistent mainly due to vowel fronting and assimilation, as well as the preceding word, we can conclude that Malaysians do not pronounce the dental fricatives, but only pronounce the alveolar stops. Therefore, both research agree that Malaysians do not pronounce the dental fricatives. However, this research disagrees with Yamaguchi and Peterson, as the analysis has shown that Malaysians does not create their own version of an alveolar stops, but rather still using the original alveolar stops, the and the.